Dust settled over Willow Creek like a shroud, concealing secrets beneath its golden haze. Mary Thornton stood at her window, watching townspeople cross the street to avoid her property. The same people who once brought pies and warm wishes. 10 years a widow, she'd become something worse in their eyes, a woman who didn't need them. Meanwhile, on the outskirts where scrubland met mountain shadow, Nahkohe dismounted his paint horse, studying the town with eyes that had seen too much hatred to be surprised by more. Two outcasts orbiting the same merciless sun, separated by prejudice thicker than the adobe walls surrounding her homestead. Could love possibly flourish, where even basic humanity had withered and died? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Mary rose before dawn, as she had every day for the past decade. The rooster hadn't crowed yet, but her body knew the rhythm of the day better than any animal. She lit the lamp and watched the flames struggle against the darkness, much like her garden struggled against the unyielding earth outside. That garden had once been her pride, rows of vegetables, herbs and flowers that brought color to the drab frontier town. Now it stood half wild, patches of withered plants mingling with hardy weeds. Like her, it persisted without thriving. She dressed methodically, plain cotton dress, worn boots, hair pinned severely at the nape of her neck. The mirror reflected a woman of 43, handsome rather than pretty, with eyes that had seen enough sorrow to last several lifetimes. "Another day," she whispered to no one. 15 years ago, she'd arrived in Willow Creek, with a trunk of books and a teaching certificate. The town had welcomed her then, a real school teacher from Boston, educated and refined. The children had brought her apples, their mothers had invited her to Sunday suppers, even the taciturn men had tipped their hats respectfully. Then Thomas Thornton had courted her, the quiet widower who ran the town's only sawmill. Their courtship had been brief but sincere, their marriage happy but short. 2 years after their wedding, Thomas died when a log slipped its chains. The town had mourned with her. At first, Mary stepped onto her porch, surveying the neglected garden. The wilted plants stood as mute testimony to the town's gradual withdrawal. First came the whispers about the curse, that Thomas was the second man to die loving her. Her first fiancé back east had drowned before their wedding day. 2 men, 2 deaths. Coincidence became superstition. Then the invitations stopped. Children were kept away from her small home school. Eventually she closed it. Mary knelt in the dirt, pulling weeds with practiced movements. The earth felt cool beneath her fingers, the only touch she knew these days. She worked until the sun crested the eastern hills, then gathered her basket for the weekly trip to the general store. The mile walk to town gave Mary time to prepare herself. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin. They might whisper, but they wouldn't see her bend. The general store's bell announced her entry. Conversations ceased immediately. Martha Wilson stood behind the counter, her round face a careful mask of shopkeeper's neutrality. "Morning, Mrs. Thornton. What can I get you today?" Mary placed her list on the counter, ignoring the stares from the women gathered near the fabric bolts. "Just the usual, thank you." Martha nodded, gathering items efficiently. Nobody moved to help, not like they did when other women shopped. Mary stood alone, her back to the whispers. "She's looking peaked." "Well, living alone like that ain't natural for a woman. Heard she talks to herself at night, lights burning till all hours." Mary kept her expression neutral. Her journal was her only confidant now. Pages filled with observations, memories and the occasional poetry that Thomas had so loved to hear her recite. The store door opened, bringing a momentary relief from the whispers. As Sheriff Mills entered, he nodded to Mary, the only person in town who still met her eyes directly. "Mrs. Thornton, fine morning." "Sheriff." He moved to the counter, exchanging pleasantries with Martha as she finished gathering Mary's supplies. His presence created a small bubble of normalcy, for which Mary was grateful. As Martha tallied her purchases, Mary noticed a book beneath the counter, a new arrival. Her fingers itched to touch it, to smell the fresh paper and ink. Reading remained her one luxury, her escape. "Is that the new Longfellow?" she asked, before she could stop herself. Martha hesitated. "It is, ordered for Reverend Caldwell." Mary nodded, swallowing her disappointment. Once, Martha would have set it aside for her, the town's teacher who had introduced many children to the joy of poetry. Sheriff Mills noticed the exchange. "I'm sure the Reverend wouldn't mind if Mrs. Thornton borrowed it when he's finished," he said mildly. Being as she's the most literary mind in the county, Martha flushed. "I suppose that would be for him to say." Mary paid for her goods. The coins counted precisely from her dwindling savings. Thomas had left her the house and enough to live simply, but teaching had supplemented her income. Now, economy was essential. Sheriff Mills followed her outside, carrying her heaviest packages to her small wagon, a courtesy he never failed to extend, despite raised eyebrows. "Don't let them get under your skin," he said quietly. "Small minds, small lives." Mary arranged her packages carefully. "I stopped letting them bother me years ago, Sheriff." It wasn't entirely true, but she'd grown skilled at concealing her. As she climbed onto the wagon seat, she noticed a figure at the far end of the street, a man on horseback, unfamiliar, watching, an Indian by his dress and the set of his body on the horse. "New visitor?" she asked. Sheriff Mills followed her gaze, his expression tightening. "Apache showed up yesterday, keeping my eye on him." "Is he dangerous?" "All strangers are potentially dangerous, Mrs. Thornton, especially those who don't fit neatly into our little world." Mary felt the weight of his words, recognizing her own situation in them. She nodded farewell and turned her wagon toward home, aware of the dark eyes following her progress down the dusty main street. Nahkohe sat motionless atop Sikimi, watching Willow Creek from the ridge. The settlement sprawled like a scar across land his ancestors had hunted for generations. He touched the medicine pouch at his neck, a small leather bag containing sacred items, a hawk feather, a stone from his birthplace, a fragment of his father's bow. His connection to a world these settlers would never understand. The horse shifted beneath him, sensing his unease. Nahkohe had not planned to stop here. His journey northward had no particular destination, just away from memories, from the reservation they'd tried to force him onto, from the missionary school that had beaten his language from his mouth, but failed to crush his spirit. "Just supplies," he murmured to Sikimi and Apache. "Then we continue." He guided the paint horse down the slope. At 38, Nahkohe had lived between worlds long enough to know what awaited him. The stairs, the hands moving instinctively toward weapons, the mothers pulling children close. The town's main street stretched before him, quiet in the afternoon heat. Nahkohe kept his posture relaxed, his face impassive. He'd learned young that showing emotion to white men was dangerous. They mistook dignity for arrogance, caution for hostility. A group of cowboys lounged outside the saloon, passing a bottle. Their conversation died as Nahkohe approached. He felt their eyes following him, measuring the threat, seeking excuses for violence. "Well, look what rode in," one said loudly enough to be heard. "Town's going downhill when we let savages shop alongside decent folk." Nahkohe continued past them toward the general store. The medicine pouch seemed heavier against his chest, a reminder of his father's words, "Show your strength by choosing when not to fight." The store's interior was cool and dim. The woman behind the counter froze when he entered. A mother pulled her child behind her skirts. Two men by the tobacco shelf straightened, hands hovering near belt knives. Nahkohe nodded politely to the shopkeeper. "I need supplies." His English was perfect. Another legacy of the mission school, along with the scars on his back from speaking his native tongue. "We don't extend credit to your kind," the woman said, her voice tight. Nahkohe reached slowly into his pocket and placed coins on the counter. No credit, I pay. The sound of silver hitting wood shifted the atmosphere slightly. Money was a language all settlers understood. The shopkeeper relaxed marginally, though her eyes remained wary. What do you need then? Coffee, flour, ammunition for hunting. He pointed to items rather than moving around the store, aware that any sudden movement might trigger panic. As the shopkeeper gathered his supplies, the door opened. Nahkohe sensed rather than saw the newcomer, a man with the steady, measured steps of someone accustomed to authority. "Afternoon, Martha," said a deep voice. "I see our visitor is getting supplies." Nahkohe turned slightly. The sheriff was tall and weathered, with eyes that had seen enough to be cautious, but not enough to be cruel. "Sheriff Mills," the shopkeeper acknowledged. "Just finishing up here." The sheriff nodded to Nahkohe. "You passing through or planning to stay a while?" "Passing through," Nahkohe answered. "Need rest." "Few days." "Where you camping?" "Old cabin, East Ridge." Sheriff Mills considered this. "Mackenzie's old trapping cabin. That's private property." "Did not know." "We'll move." "No need," the sheriff said after a moment. "Mackenzie's been dead 2 years. Nobody's claimed it." He paused. "Just keep to yourself. Some folks here aren't welcoming to strangers, especially Indians." Nahkohe finished for him. "I know white towns." The sheriff nodded, a flicker of something like respect crossing his features. "Stay out of trouble, and we'll have no problems." The bell over the door jangled as the cowboys from the saloon entered, liquor making them bold. The leader, a beefy man with a week's growth of beard, spotted Nahkohe and smirked. "Sheriff, you letting this redskin roam free in our town?" Sheriff Mills turned, authority hardening his voice. "Mr. Parker, I suggest you and your friends go sleep off whatever you've been drinking." "My PA fought Apaches," Parker continued, ignoring the warning. "Said they're only good when they're 6 feet under." Nahkohe remained still, though his muscles tensed. He'd faced men like Parker before, men who needed little excuse for violence. "Your PA also died in a drunken fall from his own horse." Sheriff Mills replied evenly. "Maybe not the best example to follow." Laughter from one of the other cowboys made Parker flush dark red. He took a step forward, but the sheriff moved between them. "That's enough. You boys head back to the ranch. And you," he said to Nahkohe, "finish your business and be on your way." Nahkohe paid for his supplies, gathered them into a saddlebag, and moved toward the door. Parker and his friends reluctantly stepped aside, but Parker leaned in as Nahkohe passed. "This ain't over, Apache," he whispered. Outside, Nahkohe mounted Sikimi smoothly, settling the saddlebags. As he turned to leave town, he caught sight of a woman loading packages into a small wagon. The same woman he'd noticed earlier, straight-backed and solitary. What caught his attention was not her appearance, but the way others avoided her, creating an island of empty space around her wagon. "Interesting," he thought. "Another outsider." She glanced up suddenly, meeting his gaze across the distance. Neither smiled nor nodded, just a moment of recognition between two people standing outside the circle. Nahkohe turned Sikimi toward the eastern ridge, toward the abandoned cabin that would shelter him for a few days. Behind him he could feel the town's collective gaze, the weight of their suspicion and fear. In his medicine pouch, the small treasures shifted against his chest with each step of his horse, reminders of who he was, regardless of what they saw when they looked at him. 2 days later, Mary guided her wagon along the rutted track from Clearwater, the next settlement over. She'd made the half-day journey to purchase seeds unavailable in Willow Creek and to escape the suffocating silence of her own town. In Clearwater, she was merely a stranger, not a pariah. The afternoon sun beat down as she rounded the bend, where the road cut through a steep embankment. Mary's mind wandered to the book she'd found in Clearwater, a collection of Wordsworth she'd been unable to resist, despite her dwindling funds. The sharp crack startled both her and the horse. The wagon lurched violently, tilting to one side. Mary clutched the seat as the horse whinnied in panic, trying to pull away from the suddenly unbalanced load. "Whoa! Easy, boy," she called, fighting to control the reins. The wagon settled at a precarious angle. Mary carefully climbed down to inspect the damage. The rear wheel had shattered where a spoke connected to the rim, the aged wood finally surrendering to years of rough travel. "Perfect," she muttered, pushing her bonnet back to wipe her brow. She was still 4 miles from town with a broken wagon, sparse water, and the sun already beginning its western descent. Mary considered her options. She could unhitch the horse and ride bareback into town for help, though who would come? She could wait, hoping another traveler might pass, unlikely on this seldom used track. Or she could attempt repairs herself with the basic tools she carried. Mary was still deliberating when she felt it, the weight of eyes upon her. She turned slowly. He sat astride his paint horse on the ridge above the road, watching, the Apache man from town. His stillness made him seem part of the landscape, as if he'd grown from the scrubby pines and rock. Mary's throat tightened. She was alone miles from town, with a man the settlers considered dangerous simply by virtue of his birth. Her hand moved instinctively to her pocket, where she kept a small knife. The rider descended the slope in a controlled slide, horse and man moving as one. He stopped a respectful distance away, studying the broken wagon. Neither spoke. The silence stretched, broken only by the creak of leather as the man dismounted. "Wheel broke," he finally said, his English clear and unaccented. Mary nodded stiffly. "Yes." He moved toward the wagon, his steps deliberate, telegraphing each movement. He knelt to examine the brake, then looked up at her. "Can fix. Temporary." Mary hesitated. Accepting help from an Indian man would feed the town's whispers for weeks. Refusing meant spending the night on the trail. "I have tools," she said finally. He nodded once and returned to his horse, retrieving something from his saddlebag. Mary watched his efficient movements, the careful way he handled his mount, not the actions of a savage, despite what the townspeople believed. She fetched her small toolkit from beneath the wagon seat. They worked in silence, side by side but not together. He split a branch to brace the broken spoke. She held pieces in place while he bound them with rawhide from his supplies. Their hands never touched, maintaining invisible boundaries. From the ridge above, Mary noticed movement. 2 riders had stopped, observing them. She recognized the Schultz brothers, who ranched north of town. They made no move to help, just watched for several long minutes before continuing on their way. "Tomorrow everyone will know," she said, more to herself than to him. The Apache man glanced up, following her gaze to the now empty ridge. "They talk about you. Why?" The directness of the question startled her. "They think I'm cursed. Cursed. My husband died, and a man before him. They believe—" She stopped, suddenly aware of how absurd it sounded. "Ah." He nodded as if this explained everything. "White people fear what they don't understand. Death. Women who live alone." The observation, so simply stated, made Mary look at him properly for the first time. His face was weathered, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he was near her own age. He wore his black hair long, secured at the nape with a leather cord. His clothes were a mixture of white and native, cotton shirt, buckskin vest, denim pants. "What's your name?" she asked suddenly. He paused in his work. "Nahkohe. I'm Mary Thornton." He nodded but offered no pleasantries, no smiles, just acceptance of the information. They completed the temporary repair in silence. When finished, Nahkohe stepped back, watching as Mary tested the wheel's stability. "It will hold to town," he said. "Not longer," Mary nodded. "Thank you." She reached for her purse, but he shook his head. "No payment. I can't accept charity. Not charity, just help." He turned to his horse, then paused. "The town. They think I'm dangerous?" "Yes. And you?" Mary considered the question. "I think everyone is capable of danger and kindness." She gestured to the repaired wheel. "Today you chose kindness." Something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps. He mounted his horse in one fluid motion. "The wheel will hold," he repeated, "but get it fixed properly." Then he was gone, riding up the slope and disappearing over the ridge, leaving Mary to ponder the strange encounter and the whispers that would surely follow. The church bell rang clear across Willow Creek, summoning the faithful to Sunday service. Reverend Caldwell stood at the door, greeting his congregation with practiced solemnity. The white clapboard building gleamed in the morning sun, its steeple the tallest structure in town, a physical reminder of its moral authority. Inside, Mary sat alone in the last pew. She hadn't attended services regularly since Thomas died, but today she felt compelled to observe. The Schultz brothers had returned to town yesterday, and she needed to gauge how quickly their story had spread. Conversations hushed as Reverend Caldwell took his place at the pulpit. Tall and austere, with silver threading his dark beard, he commanded respect through presence rather than warmth. Today he began, his voice resonating through the small church. "I wish to speak about boundaries." Mary kept her expression neutral as several heads turned subtly in her direction. "God established boundaries for our protection, between nations, between peoples, between man and woman." Reverend Caldwell's gaze swept the congregation. "When we disregard these divine boundaries, we invite chaos into our ordered world." The sermon continued, weaving scripture with pointed allegory. Never once did he mention Mary or the Apache man by name, yet his meaning remained unmistakable. Sin began with small steps across established lines. Societal order depended on each person knowing and keeping their proper place. After the final hymn, Mary attempted a quick exit, but Martha Wilson intercepted her on the church steps. "Mrs. Thornton, a moment." Martha's plump face wore an expression of rehearsed concern. "The Schultz boys mentioned they saw you on the Clearwater Road yesterday. Having trouble with your wagon, were you?" "Just a broken wheel," Mary replied evenly. "Nothing serious. They said that Indian was with you." Martha's voice lowered. "Alone on the road like that? Well, people are concerned. He helped repair my wheel. Nothing more. Still, a woman in your position should be careful about appearances. After all you've been through, to invite more difficulty." Mary met her gaze directly. "Thank you for your concern, Martha. If you'll excuse me." As she walked away, she heard Martha's whispered conference with Harriet Schultz and Emma Parker begin immediately. The damage was done. Across the street, at the town's only hotel, a different meeting was taking place. Harlan Wade, the wealthiest rancher in the county, sat with Sheriff Mills and several prominent men, including Reverend Caldwell, who had hurried over after services. "This Apache showing up is bad timing," Wade was saying. "With the railroad survey coming through next month, we need to present Willow Creek as a stable, civilized community." "He's passing through," Sheriff Mills said. "Keeps to himself." "That's not what I heard," countered Wade. "Schultz says he was mighty friendly with the Thornton widow yesterday." Several men exchanged glances. Emma Parker's husband leaned forward. "My boy says this Indian's been watching the town, sizing us up maybe. For what purpose?" Sheriff Mills asked. "Who knows? These savages don't think like civilized men." Wade's face flushed with sudden anger. "My father lost 2 brothers to Apache raids, never found enough of them to bury properly." The Reverend placed a calming hand on Wade's shoulder. "Perhaps we should form a committee for community protection." "We have a sheriff," Mills pointed out. "One man can't be everywhere." Wade countered. "And with all due respect, Sheriff, you seem reluctant to address the situation directly." Sheriff Mills studied the men around the table, recognizing the momentum building. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Nothing excessive," Reverend Caldwell assured him. "Simply a group of concerned citizens keeping watch, ensuring our women and children remain safe, and making it clear to this Apache that Willow Creek isn't a place for him to linger," added Wade. The conversation shifted to logistics. Who would participate? What authority they might claim? Sheriff Mills listened with growing unease, recognizing that such committees often became excuses for unchecked vigilantism. Meanwhile, at the general store, women gathered for their own form of community protection, the exchange of information. "Did you hear?" Harriet Schultz whispered to Rebecca Collins, a young widow who ran the town's small boarding house. "Mary Thornton was caught with that Indian man on the Clearwater Road." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Caught? They were simply in the same place, I imagine. Working together on her wagon," Harriet insisted. "My brothers said they looked mighty comfortable together." Martha Wilson joined them, adding her authority to the tale. "It's concerning. A woman living alone already raises questions, but to associate with savages—" "Mary taught my son to read before she closed her school," Rebecca said quietly. "She's a good woman who's had more than her share of sorrow." "Of course," Martha agreed quickly. "We're concerned for her safety. Her judgment seems impaired." Outside the store window, the church bell rang again, not the regular call to prayer, but a sharp, irregular pattern that signaled a town meeting. The women looked up, exchanging glances. "That's unusual for a Sunday," Rebecca noted. "These are unusual times," Martha replied, her expression grim. "When Indians and white women begin consorting on public roads, something must be done." As the bell continued its insistent summons, the people of Willow Creek moved toward the church, drawn by curiosity and concern, ready to protect what they understood and destroy what they did not. The bucket hit the bottom of the well with a hollow thunk instead of the expected splash. Mary frowned, lowering the lantern to peer into the darkness. The water level had dropped dramatically, overnight, far too quickly for natural causes. She knelt examining the stone rim of the well. Someone had pried loose several stones, and fresh dirt surrounded the opening. Mary's throat tightened with understanding. They had sabotaged her well, not enough to destroy it completely, but enough to send a message. Mary straightened, surveying her property in the early morning light. The town meeting 3 days ago had changed something fundamental. Where she had once been merely avoided, now she was being actively punished. She was still considering her options when a shadow moved at the edge of her property. Mary tensed, reaching for the rifle she'd brought outside with her. The figure emerged from the trees, leading a paint horse. Nahkohe. He stopped at the boundary of her cleared land, making no move to approach further without invitation. His dark eyes took in the rifle, her defensive posture, then the damaged well. "Water problems?" he asked, his voice carrying clearly across the distance. Mary hesitated, then lowered the rifle slightly. "Someone tampered with my well." Nahkohe nodded, as if this confirmed something. "They visited my cabin too. Left warnings." "Are you hurt?" "No. They left marks on trees. Broken arrows on my doorstep." He shrugged. "Old threats." Mary considered him for a long moment, then made a decision. "Do you know about wells?" "Some." She gestured toward the well. "Then I could use your help." Nahkohe tied his horse to a fence post and approached, his movements unhurried but purposeful. He examined the well without comment, then looked at Mary. "Tools." She retrieved her small collection of tools from the shed. Together they worked in silence, removing debris that had been deliberately dropped into the well. When they reached the water level, Nahkohe fashioned a sieve from a spare piece of wire mesh to filter out smaller contaminants. The sun was high when they finally finished. Mary's arms ached from the unaccustomed labor, but satisfaction outweighed discomfort. The well was functional again, cleaner than before in fact. "Thank you," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Nahkohe nodded, cleaning her tools methodically before returning them. "They will come back. Maybe worse next time." "I know. Why do you stay?" The question surprised her. "This is my home. Where would I go?" "Anywhere." "Many towns. Would they be any different?" Mary asked. "Or would I simply be starting over as a stranger, a widow, an object of suspicion?" Nahkohe considered this, then gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. "My people say the devil you know is better than the one you don't. Than the one you don't. Your people say that." Mary couldn't help the small smile that touched her lips. "No, but white people do, and it's true enough." A flicker of humor crossed his face, the first she'd seen. Mary's stomach growled audibly, reminding her that she'd been working through the meal hour. I was about to make some lunch. It's simple fare, but you're welcome to share it. Again, Nahkohe hesitated, understanding the significance of the invitation. Finally, he nodded. I can pay with work. Your roof needs repair. I noticed that during the last rain, Mary admitted. It's a fair trade. Inside her small house, Nahkohe stood just inside the door, taking in the modest but orderly room. Mary watched his gaze linger on her bookshelves, the one luxury she'd maintained despite hardship. You read all these? He asked. Yes, books are old friends. Nahkohe moved toward the shelves, his fingers hovering near the spines without touching. Mary busied herself preparing a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried fruit, giving him space to explore. When she turned back, he was holding a slim volume, examining it with evident familiarity. Wordsworth, he said. I know this one. Mary couldn't hide her surprise. You've read Wordsworth at the mission school. His expression darkened briefly. They believed poetry would civilize us. And did it. It gave me words for things I already knew. He opened the book, finding a page with practiced ease. One impulse from a vernal wood may teach you more of man, of moral evil and of good, than all the sages can. The words, spoken in his deep, measured voice, filled the small room. Mary stood transfixed, the plate of food forgotten in her hands. You've committed it to memory. Some things stay with you, even when they try to take everything else. Mary set the food on the table, gesturing for him to sit. The missionaries taught you English. They beat it into us. His tone was matter-of-fact, not seeking sympathy. No Apache allowed, only English. They ate in silence for a moment, the unexpected connection of shared literature hovering between them. Yet you kept your language, Mary observed. In here, he touched his chest, where they couldn't reach. Mary nodded, understanding something fundamental about resilience. Sometimes, what others can't take from us becomes our greatest strength. Nahkohe studied her, really seeing her perhaps for the first time. Is that why you stay? To show them they can't drive you away? Perhaps, Mary admitted. Or perhaps I'm just too stubborn to give them the satisfaction. A ghost of a smile touched his lips again. Stubbornness is also strength. Outside they could hear a wagon approaching. Both tensed, the brief moment of connection interrupted by the reality of their situation. I should go, Nahkohe said, rising quickly. Mary nodded, moving to the window. It's Sheriff Mills, the back way. She nodded toward the rear door, through the garden. Thank you again for your help. Nahkohe paused at the door, looking back at the book of poetry still open on the table. I will return tomorrow, for the roof. After he slipped away, Mary closed the book, her fingers lingering on its worn leather cover. An unexpected bridge between two worlds, just like the unexpected alliance forming between two outcasts. Mary found the note tucked beneath her door when she returned from collecting eggs. The paper was cheap, the handwriting deliberately disguised. The Indian must leave. Your association with him endangers you both. This is your only warning. No signature, of course. Mary crumpled the paper, then reconsidered and smoothed it flat, holding it over a candle until it blackened and curled into ash. She washed her hands afterward, as if the threat might contaminate her by touch. 3 days had passed since Nahkohe had helped with her well. True to his word, he had returned the next day to repair her roof, working efficiently under the burning sun, while Mary pretended not to notice the horseman who occasionally appeared on the distant ridge, watching. She had expected threats. Willow Creek protected its boundaries with vicious determination. What surprised her was the concern for her safety implicit in the note, as if the writer believed they were protecting her, not punishing her. Mary was still contemplating this when she heard the familiar sound of hoofbeats approaching. Nahkohe had taken to arriving from different directions each time, never establishing a pattern that might make him vulnerable to ambush. Another note? He asked, when she met him at the edge of the property, having observed her burning ritual from a distance. They're concerned for my virtue, Mary replied dryly. Nahkohe's mouth twitched. Of course, not your tendency to think for yourself. Over the past days, a cautious comfort had developed between them. Not quite friendship, both were too guarded for that, but a mutual recognition that transcended their different worlds. I need supplies from town, Mary said. Will you be all right here? I can leave. No, she gestured to the half-finished fence repair they had begun yesterday. Finish this. I won't have them thinking they've succeeded in frightening us. Us. The word hung between them, unexpected, but not retracted. Nahkohe nodded once. Be careful. In town, Mary felt the weight of stairs more acutely than ever. Outside the general store, Emma Parker and her friends fell silent as Mary approached, their expressions a mixture of disapproval and morbid curiosity. Inside, Martha Wilson's greeting was cool but professional. Mrs. Thornton, what can I get you today? Just the usual supplies, thank you. As Martha gathered items, the bell above the door jangled. A young man entered, a stranger, dressed in city clothes that marked him as an outsider. He removed his hat, revealing sandy hair and an open, curious face. Good morning, ladies, he said pleasantly. Samuel Jones, correspondent for the Chicago Tribune. He produced a small notebook and pencil. I'm gathering impressions of frontier settlements for our readers back east. Martha immediately transformed, her demeanor warming. How wonderful. We're honored to have a real newspaperman visit our humble town. Mary continued with her shopping, listening as Martha presented Willow Creek in glowing terms, the church's recent expansion, plans for a proper schoolhouse, the anticipated railroad connection. And what about the local Indians? Samuel Jones asked, making notes. Any conflicts or cooperation with native tribes? Martha's smile tightened. We've had little trouble, thankfully, though recently a lone Apache has been causing some concern. Oh, Jones looked up, interest piqued. What kind of concern? Nothing specific, Martha said carefully. Just, his presence makes folks uneasy. History, you understand. Of course. Jones nodded sympathetically. And is there a reservation nearby? No, he's just passing through. Martha lowered her voice. Though he's been here longer than expected, associating with certain residents. Mary stepped forward to pay for her purchases, deliberately inserting herself into the conversation. Your paper reports on frontier life? I hope you'll present a balanced view, Mr. Jones. The realities are more complex than Eastern readers might appreciate. Jones studied her with interest. Indeed, ma'am, that's precisely my aim. And you are? Mary Thornton. Recognition flickered in his eyes. Martha had clearly mentioned her already. A pleasure, Mrs. Thornton. I'd be very interested in your perspective on local matters. I doubt my perspective would interest your readers, Mary replied, gathering her packages. Good day, Mr. Jones. Martha, outside, Sheriff Mills was waiting beside her wagon. Morning, Mrs. Thornton. Sheriff. He helped load her purchases, then said quietly, There's talk, Mary. More than usual. There's always talk. This is different. His weathered face showed genuine concern. Harlan Wade's been organizing men. They're calling it a community watch, but it has the makings of something uglier. Because of Nahkohe? Mills nodded. And your association with him, which I couldn't help noticing when I rode by yesterday. He's helping with repairs I can't manage alone. I understand that, but others see what they want to see. He sighed. Just be careful. Wade lost family to Apaches years back. He carries that grudge like a Bible. As Mary drove home, she noticed Samuel Jones watching her from the hotel porch, notebook in hand. Another complication. Nahkohe was finishing the fence when she returned. He worked with silent efficiency, his movements economical and practiced. Mary found herself pausing to observe him, the strength in his hands, the careful precision of each task. The town has a visitor, she said, as she unloaded supplies, a reporter from Chicago. Nahkohe looked up sharply, asking questions. About the town. About you. Mary hesitated. About us. There is no us in their eyes, he said. Only a savage and a woman who should know better. And in your eyes, Nahkohe's gaze met hers steadily. Two people who understand what it means to stand outside the circle. It wasn't a declaration of feeling, both were too cautious for that, but it acknowledged the connection forming between them, unexpected and fragile, yet somehow more honest than anything Mary had known in years. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon as Mary and Nahkohe finished the last of the fence repairs. The air hung heavy with the promise of rain, the scent of damp earth already rising from the ground. Storm coming, Nahkohe observed, glancing at the blackening sky. I should go. As if in answer, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the plains. Mary assessed the churning clouds, the rapidly diminishing light. You won't make it back to your cabin before it breaks, she said. The barn has a dry loft. Nahkohe hesitated, understanding the implications of staying on her property through the night. Finally, he nodded. Thank you. They had barely secured his horse in the barn when the heavens opened. Rain pounded the roof with sudden violence, transforming the world outside to a gray blur. Inside, the barn smelled of hay, leather, and earth, familiar, comforting scents that reminded Mary of simpler times. Nahkohe built a small fire in the old stone pit used for heating branding irons. The flames cast dancing shadows on the weathered walls as they sat on bales of hay, listening to the storm's fury. Mary withdrew a bundle from her apron pocket. Bread, cheese, and dried apple slices she'd brought from the house, anticipating their situation. Silently she divided the food, passing half to Nahkohe. He accepted with a nod of thanks. From his pocket, he produced a silver flask. Coffee, he explained, offering it to her first. Cold but strong. The flask was intricately engraved with a geometric pattern. Mary traced it with her finger before taking a sip. Beautiful work. Apache design. The flask was a gift from a cavalry officer who'd rather trade than fight. Mary returned the flask, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. She reached into her dress pocket and withdrew a pocket watch, silver, with an inscription on the case. This was Thomas's, she said, opening it to reveal the face. His father's before him. Nahkohe studied it without touching. Your husband, yes. Mary ran her thumb over the inscription. Time passes, love endures. He died 7 years ago, a logging accident. The town believes you are cursed. It wasn't a question, but Mary answered anyway, yes. Thomas was the second man I loved who died. My fiancé back east drowned before our wedding. The town decided I was bad luck. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Outside, the rain continued its relentless percussion on the roof. What was he like? Your husband? Mary smiled slightly. Kind, quiet. He loved books almost as much as I did, though he had little formal education. He built my bookshelves as a wedding gift. She closed the watch, the soft click barely audible above the storm. And your family? You mentioned the mission school. Nahkohe's face hardened. Taken when I was 10. Soldiers came to our camp while the men were hunting. My mother hid me in a storage pit. He stared into the flames. I heard everything, could do nothing. Mary felt the weight of his words, the burden of survival when others perished. I'm sorry, the missionaries found me afterward, said they would save my soul. His mouth twisted. They took my language, my hair, my name, called me John, but not your spirit. No, that they could not take. He looked up from the fire, meeting her gaze. Your town fears me because they need to believe I am savage. It justifies what was done to my people. Mary nodded slowly. And they fear me because I refuse to need them. A woman who survives without a man challenges everything they believe about the natural order. The thunder crashed directly overhead, making the barn shudder. In the momentary brightness of lightning, they saw each other clearly, two souls shaped by loss, yet refusing to be defined by it. You were a teacher, Nahkohe said, changing the subject. Yes, until the rumors about the curse made parents keep their children away. You miss it, every day. Mary smiled sadly. There's nothing quite like watching a child discover the power of words, of stories. Nahkohe nodded. At the mission, there was one teacher, Brother James. He smuggled books to me. Poetry, history. Said I had a mind that shouldn't be wasted. His expression softened slightly. Not all white men are the same, just as not all Apache are the same. Mary found herself studying his face in the firelight. The strong lines, the quiet dignity, the intelligence in his dark eyes. Not handsome in the conventional way Thomas had been, but compelling in a manner she hadn't expected. "How did you escape the mission?" she asked. "I didn't. I graduated." A hint of irony touched his voice. "Top of my class. They were very proud of how they had civilized me. And then they discovered I was still Apache beneath the education." He took another sip from the flask. "I tried living in the white world, worked as a translator for the army, a guide for settlers, always an outsider. And among your own people, too white for some, too educated." He shrugged. "The world has narrow spaces for people who exist between boundaries." A comfortable silence fell between them. The storm began to subside, rain softening to a gentle patter. Nahkohe added another small branch to the fire. Mary found herself unwilling for the night to end, for morning to restore the necessary distance between them. Here, in this liminal space created by the storm, they had found a rare honesty. "We should rest," Nahkohe finally said. "Morning comes early." Mary nodded, though neither moved. The pocket watch rested between them on the hay bale, a tangible reminder of the past that shaped her present. Beyond the barn walls, the world with all its judgments waited. But for now, in the storm's embrace, they had found a momentary shelter from more than just the rain. Mary smelled the smoke before she saw it. Acrid and sharp, it cut through the early morning air as she stepped onto her porch. Her eyes followed the thin grey trail to its source, the corner fence post, charred and still smouldering, a blackened reminder that patience in Willow Creek was wearing thin. She approached it cautiously. The fire had been deliberate. Rags soaked in kerosene, wrapped around the base of the post. Had the night's dampness not hindered the flames, the entire fence might have caught. A warning then, not yet destruction, but the promise of it. Mary was still examining the damage when Nahkohe materialized from the tree line. He'd taken to watching her property from a distance each morning before approaching, a precaution that now seemed justified. "They're getting bolder," he observed, kneeling to study the burned wood. "Sheriff Mills warned me about Harlan Wade's community watch." Mary's voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "This has his signature." Nahkohe nodded, his expression grim. "The tracks show 3 men, one heavier than the others. Wade himself, most likely. He wouldn't trust others to send his message." They worked together to replace the damaged post, neither mentioning the obvious escalation it represented. Mary found herself moving with heightened awareness, scanning the surrounding landscape frequently for observers. "You should leave," she said finally, breaking their focused silence. "I've put you in danger by accepting your help." "I was in danger the moment I entered this town." Nahkohe straightened, wiping dirt from his hands. "And you were in danger long before I arrived." "Different kinds of danger. Are they?" He gestured toward the replaced post. "Hatred wears many faces, but its heart remains the same." Before Mary could respond, the sound of an approaching horse drew their attention. A woman rode toward them, Rebecca Collins, the young widow who ran the boarding house. Mary tensed, surprised by the unexpected visitor. Rebecca reined in her mare at a respectful distance, her eyes darting nervously between Mary and Nahkohe. "Mrs. Thornton, I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all." Mary moved toward her, conscious of Nahkohe, deliberately stepping back to appear less threatening. "Is something wrong?" Rebecca dismounted, lowering her voice though no one else was near. "I thought you should know. There was a meeting last night at the hotel. Wade and Reverend Coldwell, about 20 others. About the Indian problem." Mary's tone made the quotation marks evident. Rebecca nodded. "And about you, they're saying terrible things." She glanced at Nahkohe, who remained expressionless. The reporter, Mr. Jones, was asking questions that seemed to agitate them further. What kind of questions? Mary asked. About the town's history with the local tribes, about why a single Apache man would cause such concern. Rebecca twisted her reins nervously. Mr. Wade accused him of stirring up trouble with Eastern sentimentality. Mary absorbed this information, adding it to her mental calculation of growing risks. Thank you for telling me, Rebecca. It was brave of you to come. It was the right thing to do. Rebecca straightened, a flash of determination crossing her youthful face. Not everyone agrees with Wade, you know. Some of us remember your kindness, your teaching. The sincerity in her voice touched Mary unexpectedly. It had been so long since anyone from town had shown her genuine support. Be careful, Mary warned. Association with me has consequences, so I've been reminded. Rebecca mounted her horse with practiced ease. They're planning something, Mrs. Thornton. I don't know what exactly, but she hesitated, then finished. Watch yourselves. After she rode away, Mary turned to find Nahkohe studying her thoughtfully. You have an ally, he observed. Perhaps, but one swallow doesn't make a summer. In my experience, those who stand alone often discover unexpected companions when storms approach. Nahkohe gestured toward the distant town. Your Rebecca has courage. She's not mine, Mary corrected automatically. But yes, she does. They returned to work, but the morning's events had cast a shadow over their established routine. The burned fence post, Rebecca's warning pieces of a pattern forming around them, tightening like a noose. By midday, Mary noticed riders on the ridge again, 3 men watching openly now, not bothering to conceal their surveillance. Nahkohe saw them too, but continued working, his movements deliberate and unhurried. They want you to run, he said without looking up. To show fear, I know. Mary handed him tools as needed, their coordination now practiced and efficient. I've been giving them what they expect for years, the reclusive widow, safely contained in her grief and isolation. And now I'm consorting with an Apache. A hint of defiance colored her voice. Breaking their precious boundaries. Nahkohe's dark eyes met hers. Boundaries exist to separate what people fear from what they understand, or what they refuse to understand. The watchers remained on the ridge until sunset, a constant reminder of the town's vigilance. When Nahkohe finally prepared to leave, they both knew the day marked a turning point. Tomorrow, Mary said, I'll go into town again. We need supplies, and I want to speak with Sheriff Mills. Nahkohe nodded, mounting his horse. I'll be watching. He glanced toward the now empty ridge, as will they. As darkness fell, Mary stood on her porch, lamp in hand, deliberately visible to anyone still observing from the shadows. Let them watch, she thought. Let them see a woman who refused to cower. Inside, she took out her journal, recording the day's events in precise handwriting. The burned fence post, Rebecca's warning. The watchers, words capturing the escalation that both she and Nahkohe could feel approaching, inevitable as the changing seasons, and potentially just as transformative. Mary returned from town with troubling news. Sheriff Mills had been called away to the county seat for several days, leaving his young deputy in charge, a boy barely 20, who followed Harlan Wade's lead in all matters. The timing seemed suspiciously convenient. No law to protect us now, she told Nahkohe, as they sat on her porch in the fading light. The evening had brought a rare coolness to the air. A brief respite from summer's relentless heat. Law rarely protects people like us, Nahkohe replied without bitterness. A simple statement of fact. They had finished the most critical repairs to Mary's property over the past week. The fence stood strong, the roof no longer leaked, the well produced clean water. There was no practical reason for Nahkohe to continue coming each day, yet neither mentioned his departure. I spoke with Samuel Jones, the reporter, Mary said. He sought me out at the general store. Nahkohe raised an eyebrow. And he's more perceptive than he appears, asked pointed questions about the town's treatment of me over the years. About you. She hesitated. About us. What did you tell him? The truth. That you've helped with repairs. That the town disapproves. Mary smoothed her skirt, a gesture that betrayed her discomfort. He wants to interview you as well. Nahkohe shook his head. My words would only inflame the situation, perhaps. Mary looked out over her land, the shadows lengthening across recently tilled soil. Or perhaps the town needs inflaming. Secrets fester in darkness. They sat in companionable silence as the first stars appeared. In the week since the storm, something had shifted between them, comfort replacing caution, understanding deepening into something neither was ready to name. Nahkohe reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, extending it toward Mary. For you. In his palm lay a carved wooden bird, a tiny hawk with outstretched wings, rendered with remarkable detail. Mary took it carefully, running her finger over the smooth curves and precise feathers. You made this? Nahkohe nodded. My father taught me, before. The simple gift left Mary speechless. It had been years since anyone had given her anything, years of self-sufficiency that had hardened into isolation. The small wooden bird represented something precious, recognition. It's beautiful, she finally managed. Thank you. Hawks adapt, Nahkohe said, watching her examine the carving. They survive where other birds cannot. Mary understood the comparison and the compliment within it, like certain people. Yes, a sudden impulse made Mary rise. Will you stay for supper? I have stew. The invitation crossed yet another boundary, sharing a meal inside her home at her table, an intimacy that would scandalize the town if known. Nahkohe understood this. She could see it in his hesitation. Yes, he said finally. I would like that. Inside, Mary lit lamps and moved with practiced efficiency, setting the table with her everyday dishes, nothing fancy but clean and well kept. Nahkohe stood awkwardly until she gestured to a chair. Please, sit. The domesticity of the scene struck Mary as she served the simple meal. How ordinary it would appear to outsiders, yet how extraordinary it felt to her. Conversation came easily as they ate, discussing books they had both read, sharing observations about the natural world they both respected. In your language, Mary asked, what is the word for hawk? Itsa. Nahkohe pronounced it slowly, watching as she attempted to repeat it. Itsa. Mary tried her pronunciation, making him smile slightly. Close, from the throat. He demonstrated again. They continued this way, Nahkohe teaching her words from his language. Tree, sky, water, Mary repeating them with increasing accuracy. The simple exchange felt intimate, magical, his ancestral tongue coming to life in her kitchen, words that the mission school had forbidden him to speak. And what is the Apache word for friend? Mary asked. Nahkohe studied her face in the lamplight. She, but we are more than friends now, are we not? The directness of the question caught Mary off guard. Before she could respond, the sound of approaching horses shattered the moment. Many horses moving quickly. They both rose, extinguishing lamps, except one. Nahkohe moved to the window, his body tense with alertness. 6 riders, he reported quietly. Wade and his men. Mary joined him at the window. In the dim moonlight, she could make out the mounted figures stopping at her gate. Harlan Wade's voice carried clearly through the night air. Mrs. Thornton, we need to speak with you. Mary and Nahkohe exchanged glances. Whatever fragile peace they had found in these quiet moments now faced its greatest test. Stay inside, she whispered, moving toward the door. Nahkohe caught her arm gently. They've seen my horse. They know I'm here. Mary nodded, understanding the implications. No matter what happened next, there would be no returning to the way things were. The wooden hawk sat on the table between their half-finished meals, a small, beautiful thing now caught in the gathering storm. Together then, she said, and opened the door to face whatever came next. Mary and Nahkohe stepped onto the porch together, a united front against the mounted men at her gate. The wooden hawk rested in Mary's pocket, a talisman of courage. What do you want, Mr. Wade? Mary's voice carried clearly through the night air. Harlan Wade sat tall in his saddle, flanked by 5 men including Parker and the Schultz brothers. Lanterns cast harsh shadows across their determined faces. "We've come to escort this Indian out of our town, Mrs. Thornton," Wade announced, "and to remind you of your place in this community." "My place?" Mary stepped forward. "I've lived here 15 years, Mr. Wade. My husband helped build this town. What gives you the right to determine my place? Decency, morality, the safety of our women and children." Wade's voice hardened. "Your association with this savage threatens everything we've built." Nahkohe remained silent beside Mary, his presence steady and unintimidated. "The only threat I see," Mary replied, "is 6 men on horseback harassing a widow at night." A commotion at the road drew everyone's attention. 2 more riders approached, Rebecca Collins and Samuel Jones, the reporter. "What's happening here?" Jones called out, notepad already in hand. Wade shifted uncomfortably. "This doesn't concern you, Mr. Jones. 6 armed men confronting a woman and her guest. I'd say that's precisely the kind of frontier justice my readers would find fascinating." Jones dismounted, moving closer. "Perhaps you'd care to explain your actions for my article." Rebecca hurried to Mary's side. "Sheriff Mills returned early," she whispered. "He's gathering men he trusts. They'll be here soon." Wade, unaware of this development, pointed accusingly at Nahkohe. "This Apache has overstayed his welcome. We're escorting him to the county line." "By what authority?" Jones asked, writing rapidly. "Is he wanted for a crime?" "His kind don't need to commit specific crimes to be unwelcome," Wade snapped. "His kind," Jones repeated, pencil poised. "And what kind would that be, Mr. Wade?" "A man who helps a widow with repairs. A man who has broken no laws." The standoff continued as more riders appeared. Sheriff Mills with 3 deputies and several townsmen, including the elderly shopkeeper who had sold Mary her books over the years. "That's enough, Wade," Sheriff Mills called. "This isn't how we handle matters in Willow Creek." "Since when do you defend Indians over your own people, Sheriff?" Wade demanded. "Since my job became upholding the law for all people," Mills replied evenly. "Last I checked, there's no law against helping a neighbor." The confrontation might have escalated further, but an unexpected voice broke through the tension. Elder Simmons, the town's oldest resident, who rarely left his home anymore. "There's something you should all know," the old man said, his voice quavering but clear. "Something about this town's history with the Apache." Silence fell as Elder Simmons produced an aged document from his coat. "This land, all of it, including where the town stands, was peacefully traded with the local tribes 70 years ago. My father was there. He signed as witness." The revelation rippled through the gathered crowd. Samuel Jones moved closer, examining the document with keen interest. The agreement included safe passage for all Apache through this territory. Elder Simmons continued. "We've forgotten our own history, twisted it to justify our fears." Harlan Wade's face flushed with anger. "One old paper doesn't change. It changes everything," Sheriff Mills interrupted. "It means Nahkohe has every right to be here, just as Mrs. Thornton has every right to associate with whomever she chooses." The balance of power had shifted. With the sheriff's men, Jones's notepad, and the unexpected historical document, Wade's vigilante justice lost its momentum. One by one, his supporters grew uncomfortable under the scrutiny. "This isn't over," Wade muttered, wheeling his horse around. "Actually, Mr. Wade," Jones called after him, "I believe it is. My article about Willow Creek's reconciliation with its history should make fascinating reading across the country." As Wade and his men departed, Mary felt Nahkohe's hand brush against hers, a private gesture of solidarity amid the public drama. Days later, Mary sat on her porch, journal open on her lap, watching Nahkohe tend to the garden they had started together. Sheriff Mills had made it clear that Nahkohe was welcome to stay, backed by Elder Simmons' document and Jones's widely circulated article that had brought unwanted scrutiny to the town's treatment of outsiders. The whispers hadn't stopped entirely. Such deep-rooted prejudices rarely vanished overnight,
but they had lost their power to threaten. "What are you writing?" Nahkohe asked, joining her on the porch. Mary smiled, showing him the page where she practiced writing words in Apache: sky, earth, friend, love. "I'm learning a new language," she said, "for a new chapter." In her garden, native plants now grew alongside her traditional flowers, different roots sharing the same soil, creating something beautiful in their unlikely harmony. Just like the two people who tended them, defying the towns, two people who tended them, defying the towns, to write their own date. The wooden hawk watched from the windowsill as Mary closed her journal. The town had been so certain she would die alone. The town had been so certain she would die alone. They never imagined she would find everything in the one person they feared most. They were wrong, she would not, she said softly.
Nahkohe took her hand, his eyes reflecting the setting sun. They were wrong about many things. Together, they watched darkness fall, no longer afraid of what it might bring.